Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Count Chocula Decrypted. I am, of course, the host of the show, Count Chocula. Not only the host, I'm the only person here. It's a one man show right now. But once again, thanks for tuning in. What exactly is Count Chocula Decrypted about? Simply put, it's about me reminiscing about things that I loved, mostly from my childhood. And right now, the big focus of the show is the Bronze Age of Marvel Comics. One of the things that I love the most. So, unapologetically, I believe that the Bronze Age of Marvel Comics is the greatest era of comic books. I keep saying that unapologetically, and I will continue to keep saying that. But anyway, there's a lot of people, YouTube, social media that kind of have made their brand on commenting about more of the negative side of where the industry is going, whether it be the movies like Star Wars, the stuff people love that has over the decades that have built up quite a fandom, whether it be comic books or movies or Star Wars or the Matrix or whatever you have. I haven't really talked about anything but Marvel comic books so far. Eventually, I will get into some other franchises and stuff like that. But most people, there's a lot of. I shouldn't say most people, but there are a lot of people in the space that kind of made their brand on, being critical, and I am all for that as well. I watch a lot of those people, and for the most part, I agree with the vast majority of things that are stated about the current state of comic books and movies and all of that. Um, so that kind of leads me into my first topic. But overall, on this show, which is episode 8, I'm going to be kind of giving some snapshots. As the main topic is going to be showing some snapshots from the 60s, 70s, and 80s regarding comic book sales figures. Um, something that really intrigues me in the mid 80s, toward the later 80s. I started at the local university, enrolled at the local university, and i would uh, I would go down to the student lounge, and there'd be some office rooms down there. The student lounge had a bowling alley, pool hall, all of that stuff. And a couple times a week, some guys would gather, and there maybe, 20, 30 people would gather in some of these like banquet room offices, and they'd play Dungeons and Dragons and read comic books, and we would just talk about comics for hours and hours. Now, I didn't hang out there a lot, but I would go I'd go maybe once a week and hang out there a few hours and talk about comic books. And I really got interested in a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff regarding, in particular, Marvel Comics. So that's why it kind of interests me, and I kind of like to share some of the info that I know that I've gathered over the last few decades of reading interview magazines and listening to podcasts and watching YouTube and all that stuff. That you gather little bits of pieces of kind of behind the scenes info when it comes to this stuff. And it that became just as interesting to me almost as the actual comic books themselves. So anyway, I'm not above, though, commenting on some recent goings on in the industry, and kind of giving my 2 cents about what's going on. And that's going to lead me to my first little topic here that I'm going to bring up here, just for any kind of people that are listening on Spotify. I've begun to record the video portion of this for YouTube. So I might be referring to some visual stuff that I have up on my screen here. So I'll try to accommodate both forms, the video portion and the audio the best I can. It's not always going to work out, but so anyway, CBR.com has a headline here. A few, back. I'm not sure when this was dated. January 12th. So I'm a little behind. I'm a little behind this headline. I'm sure there's more headlines in other sites, but this is the one I first pointed to, and I ended up getting into kind of an argument with some, a guy on a social media site, kind of regarding this underlying idea here. It says Batwoman star discusses portraying DC's first black Joker. Nick Cregan, the Joker's first ever black actor, talks about following in the footsteps of Hollywood royalty and making the character his own. So if I scroll down here in the article, it says Cregan discusses how the new portrayal came to be, from the influences of past Joker actors to the selection of various purple hair extensions. It's crazy, Cregan said. It's wild. Actually, yeah, I've done a lot of processing the first few weeks, months, It's surreal to me. It's been a wild ride for me. The reception of the new Joker being the first person of color to play this role. The message and the love I've been getting has just been overwhelming. It's been a fun ride. Well, but in no, in this interview, there's nobody's tackling the issue of why we have a black Joker. Okay, I mean, it's all well and good, and this is the trend of the modern movies and the comic books, that they're replacing actual creativity with just swapping gender, swapping race, and just highlighting the sexuality of a character. And it's never like an original character. They have to implement all this stuff on well-established characters. We all know the Joker's been around forever, well-established character, but in no way, shape, or form are they addressing why that they're casting a black actor to play the Joker. As we can see in the last few years, none of this gender swapping, none of this race swapping or highlighting the sexuality or the creator's self inserting their politics into these characters have equated in the quality of the book, enhancing the quality of the book. And it definitely hasn't equated to increased sales of the book. So, it's basically just doing it to fulfill an agenda, a cultural, social, political agenda. And, I think it's ridiculous. And a lot of people have already commented on this, but I got into an argument, recently kind of about this topic. And they had brought up, I got an argument on social media. This person had brought up that, no one complained when Nick Fury was cast as a black guy. And I wanted to address, I proceeded to explain to him that is a 100% total different situation. What had happened with Nick Fury was in early 2000s, they had a couple creators. I think it was, don't quote me on these names. I think it's Brian Hitch. I hit my keyboard there. Brian Hitch, and I think Mike Millar, I can't remember. So don't quote me on those creators. They were charged with, at Marvel, launching a Marvel Ultimates line. And they said to themselves, wouldn't it be cool if we could rebrand Nick Fury Classic Marvel character. I mean, he's not a mainstream character by any. He was always kind of a supporting character. Yeah, he was a good. His book sold, which we will be seeing later in the show. His book uh, it was a popular book in the late '60s, early '70s. Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos, but he's in no way, shape, or form was he like a mainstream character like Spider-Man or the Hulk or what have you. So, uh, you know, so they were saying, wouldn't it be cool to rebrand this character and model this character after the actor Samuel L. Jackson? And so it came to be. And I even believe, and once again, I'm not 100% on this, but I believe they did contact in one way or another Samuel L. Jackson to get his permission to depict the Nick Fury character based on Samuel L. Jackson. So we're going to model this character after the visually after Samuel L. Jackson. Early 2000s, Samuel L. Jackson was a wildly popular actor. He had been cast in Star Wars prequel, not sequel, as Mace Windu, Jedi Knight. And, Samuel L. Jackson was in everything. But that's the difference. This Batwoman incident where and it's just not the Joker that they're casting. They've done it. They did it in the Eternals. They're doing it. They're making black, the rumor is they're making black Batman. They already did Miles Morales, Black Spider-Man, which nobody asked for. And, it's not selling. It didn't do anything to heighten the character. It actually just proved that that is mostly detrimental to the sales figures of the character. But they're doing it for Superman, and then they're also highlighting, they're changing the sexuality and a bunch of gender swaps. It's just kind of the thing that's kind of going on right now. It's all it's going to come back around eventually, but it's kind of the cultural trend. But that's what you get when you hire people with no talent. You're hiring no talent activists in your company to write this material. They have no idea about these characters. All they want to do is insert their own viewpoints of the world into these characters, and that never works out. And the problem is, it's not new characters; it's already established characters. So anyway, I made the point about the Nick Fury Samuel L. Jackson. That is based on a specific person. It's not because Samuel L. Jackson is black that they ended up making Nick Fury. It's not that they were turning Nick Fury into a black guy, but they were specifically modeling him after an individual actor, Samuel L. Jackson. So, and as we know, it ended up coming to pass, not only in the comic books, but Samuel L. Jackson was actually offered the role in the movie. I think that was all by design for Marvel. They knew what was coming down the road. You had the success with Spider-Man, even though that wasn't Marvel. The Marvel movie was a Sony movie. They knew they were going to be starting their own studio. They knew they had plans for these characters, and I think it was all by design. So, and it came to pass, and the fans love it. It actually heightened the character. However you feel about Samuel L. Jackson, there are a lot of people that think Samuel L. Jackson is really cool. He's got that kind of that swagger persona, and and I think he plays Nick Fury. I think he does the Nick Fury character justice. So once again, that was modeled after a specific person. So that's totally different than what's going on today with them just saying, "Hey, I know my creative juices are flowing. Let's turn this character into a woman. Let's Black Batman. Oh boy, look at me go. I'm so creative. Let's make Superman gay, or let's make Batwoman a black lesbian. So much creativity flowing, and it's just ridiculous. The sales aren't there. It's detrimental to the industry in the long run. And, eventually, at the end of the day, the comic book business is a business. They're there to make a profit. This is why the Japanese and independent creators have kind of taken over, and Marvel and DC sales are way down. So that's just kind of my little commentary on that situation. So I'm gonna segue into the main topic here because there's quite a lot to go over. First off, I kind of wanted to show here, and I've got some of these pages bookmarked, so bear with me here. Let's go to some old comic book sales figures, and this kind of ties into what I led with, that there's a lot of things that affect comic book sales, and whether it be cultural trends or what have you, but never was they never really tried to implement just changing something for the sake of changing it, or the creators were just kind of self-insert their own political views into comic books, into the well-established characters, and think that was going to turn into any kind of success, because it doesn't. They've got the receipts. You can see by the sales. Japanese manga is absolutely crushing in the United States, not just globally, but in the United States. Japanese manga, which they don't fool with that kind of stuff. They don't fool with the identity politics. They know that all of that stuff really has no place in comic books. Now, it goes without saying that doesn't mean comic books can address current political events, things like that. And I'll give you a perfect example. Steve Englehart was writing Captain America in the early to mid 70s, around 1973, 1974. And, a lot of things were going on in the United States in 1973, 1974 regarding the government, how people, the feeling, that the people had toward the government. You had the end of the wildly unpopular Vietnam War, and you had Watergate. So instead of just coming out and having Captain America, inserting his political views, I'm sure most of the people at Marvel, it's in New York. They were more liberal. You're talking about more of the hippie crowd, more liberal crowd at the time. I'm sure they absolutely hated what was going on. But they didn't self-insert their politics into the book. And at the time with Captain America, they simply made Captain America become kind of, he kind of became disillusioned with trusting the government. So they changed his identity. They made him shed. Steve Rogers decided to. Well, I'm no longer Captain America. I don't like what's going on. But they made it self-serve the story. They made it highlight the story arc that they were in the middle of, and he became Nomad, the man without a country. But it ends up, and all of that was the direct result of Vietnam War and Watergate, the reason why they did that. But they never equated the Red Skull with Richard Nixon or anything like that, what they did with Donald Trump and a lot of the Marvel villains. They started patterning after Donald Trump. Okay. They gave MODOK the face of Donald Trump. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, instead of depicting the Red Skull as like Richard Nixon or something, they simply made Captain America don a new identity that doesn't necessarily identify as Captain America. He's now Nomad. But what happens is somebody else takes over Captain America. somebody without the super soldier serum, and they end up getting killed by the Red Skull. And Steve Rogers feels responsible for this, and he sees that he made the mistake, that it should be on his shoulders. He feels that the burden of being Captain America should be on his shoulders, and not to throw that all away just because there were a handful of corrupt politicians. That shouldn't change his overall view of America. So that's one way that they creatively inserted what was going on politically in the country into the story, and it wasn't a direct insert. But anyway, that's just a kind of an example that came to mind when I've been thinking about all of this stuff going on. So let's go to here we've got some 1962 year in comic book. I wanted to see if I had something. Wanted to see if I had a different year. Let's look at Let's not go back to 1962. Let's go. This is actually 1963. So, as you can see right here, we've got some sales figures. What was going on in 1963 was the Fantastic Four pretty much starting their second year. Marvel had been basically focused on like romance, under Timely Comics, and a lot of Western comic books. But as you can see, number one selling in 1963, Dennis the Menace at 493,000 issues sold per copies sold per issue. You've got Archie, then you got Walt Disney stuff, Three Stooges, Tarzan. Going down here, the first number 21, you can see there's no Marvel on this list. I mean, you're not going to have any of the current Marvel comic books on this list because they didn't exist in 1963. They were just starting. Spider-Man was just getting his own book in 1963. But you've got Sea Devils here at number 21. Well, this list is there. I guess in 1963 there wasn't any information about the sales of Batman or Superman for whatever reason. For DC, their little article up here explains that much. The statements without any sales figures. DC with the 1963 reports. DC alone among publishers began printing out many of its statements without any sales figures. Whatever reason, they had Sea Devils. They started, and they didn't actually start giving figures till 1965. So I would assume Batman and Superman are in this list. Okay, I'm just assuming they're fairly popular comic book characters. 1963. I don't know. I couldn't say that they're outselling Archie books, but I'd imagine they're right up here at the top because you've got Tarzan, Flintstones. I'm sure Batman and Superman are outselling that kind of stuff. Three Stooges. But I'm just that kind of gives you just an idea that Marvel isn't in the equation yet. You've got Kid Colt Outlaw, Tales to Astonish, Strange Tales, Rawhide Kid. This is all Marvel stuff, and it's all Western stuff. They don't even have the Fantastic Four here. Fantastic Four is just getting going here. So maybe Marvel didn't release the sales of Fantastic Four. I'm sure it was fairly popular, but I'm sure it wasn't anywhere near top of this list. So that's just kind of a snapshot for 63. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the 60s, but I did want to go. I did want to jump to 1963. Now I want to jump to 1966, and you'll see a big difference here. Look at Batman. Now they've got sales figures for Batman selling almost 900,000 copies. Copies sold per issue. Batman with Superman right there behind it at nearly 720,000. You got Superboy, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. World's Finest Comics is both Batman and Superman. selling right around 500,000. And then you've got Archie, which the sales are up for Archie as well. Comic book sales were booming in the late 60s, mid to late 60s. Both both the overall comic book market takes a downturn in the 70s. And that can have there might be a lot of factors behind that. Could be economic factors. The economy in the 1970s wasn't that great in the United States of America. There were a lot of people struggling. Probably comic books weren't the big priority, the household financial priority, I can pretty much assume. But as you can see, Batman, Superman, DC is ruling here. Archie, it's all DC. 1966, Metal Men, all DC. But you do see The Amazing Spider-Man selling at 340,000 copies. That's a pretty good number. Spider-Man had been around about 3 years now. And you also see the Fantastic Four here at number 19 selling 329,000. You got the Flash down here. You also have Thor from Marvel. You have Avengers coming in at 269,000. Those are some high numbers. Now you have to take into account that you're going to see a big shift in the 70s. But you have to take into account where there's not a whole lot of different titles to choose from. Okay, they're adding more and more titles. I'm talking about Marvel in particular. There's not a whole lot of different titles at the time. So you got X-Men down here selling 255,000 copies sold per issue. Now I'm not sure if X-Men. I think X-Men in 1966 was monthly. I think most of these books were monthly. Later on, X-Men would be downgraded to bi-monthly. But as you can see, Green Lantern down here. But the sales figures are fairly strong if you equate all that over to the 70s, because you'll see a downturn of overall sales in the 70s. As you can see, the Kid Cold Outlaw has dropped way down. The romance novels and the romance comic books and the Western comic books are starting to fall off. Now, what had happened in 1966 is the Adam West Batman television show on HBO. HBO didn't exist in the 1966. Let me start that again. The Adam West Batman show premiered on ABC, and it was a big hit. It was big pop culture thing. They had, not only did they have an array of celebrities at the time portraying the villains like Cesar Romero, Frank Gorshin. They had Julie Newmar, as Catwoman. Later on it was Eartha Kitt and Lee Merriweather, but Julie Newmar was the original Catwoman. So they had some celebrities at the time, and they'd also have like cameos from celebrities, like they'd have like Bob Hope or Dick Clark or whatever, and they're climbing up the side of the building. They'd have like a cameo of a celebrity pop their head out and have a little discussion, kind of a ridiculous little discussion with Batman as they're climbing the side of the building. But Superman's still strong here. So let's move on here. The Adam West Batman show did boost the mainstream popularity of Batman. It wouldn't last very long. I think it got canceled. I think it lasted for 3 years. So we've got so let's go to 1969. Let's jump to 1969 with some sales records. As you can see, Archie back on top, and all the superhero stuff is kind of falling off. Superman's remained pretty strong here at number 2, number 3, number 4. Superman's probably, Superman was always like the most mainstream household name comic, most popular comic book superhero ever. Pretty much still is. even though it doesn't always equate to modern comic book sales. You've got Betty and Veronica, Action Comics, which is Superman again. But as you can see, number 7, who's creeping up here in 1969? Amazing Spider-Man. I believe he's got his animated show now. I didn't end up watching that until I didn't end up being able to watch that Spider-Man animated show until the 80s, until my parents finally got cable television. Yeah, it was syndicate. It ended up being on cable television. I guess there were some markets that had it, but I had never watched one of those old, late 1960s Spider-Man cartoons until the early 80s. So, but you saw Spider-Man pretty much everywhere before that. So as you can see, Spider-Man in 1969 starting to creep up, and Marvel starting to creep up as well. You have Fantastic Four coming up with number 12 here, 340,000. You've got Thor, 266. Now you've got the Hulk coming up. The popularity of the Hulk was increasing. Daredevil, 245,000. Daredevil is over Captain America. That's crazy. Daredevil would not see those sales again for a long time. Then you have the Avengers. Daredevil's outselling the Avengers, and the X-Men here are kind of neck and neck. The team books haven't caught on yet. Except maybe the Fantastic Four, Justice League of America a little bit, but the solo books had always kind of sold better. The solo adventures of the characters. Here you have Justice League of America. The team books weren't doing very well. So there you have There you have kind of a snapshot of 1969. The same way the Batman TV show helped Batman sales, the Archie show debuted on CBS Saturday morning, and it really boosted Archie comic books up to the top. So while the 1960s closed with the superheroes of the Silver Age in ascendance, meaning they're going up, Marvel was increasingly devoted to superheroes and was better positioned than other publishers to enter the 1970s. But all publishers would find it one of the tougher decades in the history of comic books, sales-wise. I think there was a lot of good creativity going on in the 70s, but sales overall were down, and you'll see that here when we jump up. Now, my next little thing here is that I'm going to show is 1973. Now, this isn't going to show DC sales. This is from here on out, from the 70s, I'm not going to show any sales of DC. But take it from me, and that kind of that little segment of that article kind of spells it out that you would see Marvel overtake DC in the 70s. So let's jump into 1973, and we're going to be on a totally different plane here. 1973 is pretty much the launch of what's considered to be the Bronze Age of comics, the age that I enjoyed the most. It was not only because I started getting into comic books in 1975, 1976, roughly in between there. These are potentially the best-selling ongoing Marvel comic series of 1973. Now, we are going to, and it says, for some titles marked with an asterisk, I have come up with a potential number. So not all of this is exact data. Says Amazing Spider-Man was the true success story for Marvel. You'll see that all throughout the 70s. Fantastic Four came in strong too, but let's kind of look at what we've got here. Best-selling comic books of 1973. You see, and this is Marvel only. Keep in mind, this is Marvel only. Number 1, Amazing Spider-Man. 273,000 copies is what it averaged per issue. That is down almost 100,000 from what we saw from the 60s. But like I said, the overall market was down. The overall sales. You have to remember as well, taking into account, Marvel has many more titles in the 70s than they do from the mid 60s. I don't know the exact number. I think they had like maybe over 60 titles to choose from now. In the 1960s, they didn't have that many. They've added some more horror books. And I know in the late 60s, they added more, early 70s, they added more horror titles, which never really caught on. There was a few exceptions, but it never really caught on to overtake the superhero, kind of the superhero genre of the comic books. And you'll also see the big fall off of the other type of comics like romance and the Western comic books. So as you can see, Amazing Spider-Man 1, 2, Marvel Team Up, 1973. This is the first year of Marvel Team Up. And they're estimating that's 218,000. That's probably right. Marvel Team Up was a hugely popular book. In 1973, they started out with it being focusing on Spider-Man and the Human Torch. That was the first kind of first run of the book. And then they had actually a few issues where it was without Spider-Man, it was just Human Torch. But eventually, they have to go with their most popular, their most up-and-coming character, which was Spider-Man. So Marvel Team Up, after the first year, became solely Spider-Man teaming up with another hero. It was always Spider-Man. It was, the Human Torch kind of got factored out of it. So, but as you can see on number 4, still, Spider-Man is ruling Marvel basically. It wasn't until 1976 that they introduced another Spider-Man title, Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, which kind of had they kind of had an agreement where they would still try to keep the Amazing Spider-Man as the main book, the legacy book. So number 4 on the list here in 1973 is Conan. Now, the interesting thing about Conan is, and I would assume that it says 215,000 copies. I would assume Conan might have sold a little better than that. Conan was not a Marvel property. The rights to Conan was owned by Robert E. Howard. I believe that's right. And Stan Lee at the time, Stan Lee had stepped down from being editor-in-chief. Stan Lee was more of just a figurehead. He still had an influence of what was going on with the Marvel office in New York. But he had his sights set on moving out west, getting into the animation, getting into the television, getting into the movies. That's what his goal was starting in the 70s. So he was kind of relinquished. He kind of had a protege named Roy Thomas, and Stan Lee was against picking up the license to Conan. He just didn't think anyone would be interested in that kind of fantasy, sorcery fantasy type, kind of world that didn't even tie in to the Marvel universe at large. Like the Conan books were totally separate, than the Marvel universe. But he was dead wrong. Conan became a huge success, licensed success for Marvel Comics. So as you can see, it says 215,000 copies. I'd assume it was a little more than that. I know Conan was a big time popular book. I myself did not buy Conan in the 70s. I would read every once in a while, but I just wasn't interested in anything that was kind of separate from the Marvel universe at large. If it didn't tie into the canon of the Marvel universe, I really wasn't that interested. And that goes kind of the same for Jack Kirby's Eternals. I would read it, and I think I bought one issue, but I never I never like really got into it as much, even though I think Conan was a really cool character. Money for me in the 70s, a little kid, was in short supply. So Conan was not I don't think I ever bought a issue of Conan from Marvel. So as you can see, number 5 here is Thor at 195,000 copies. Thor, one of the older titles of Marvel, behind Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. Thor was doing okay, but overall sales is down. Everything's down like 100,000 copies. Iron Man comes in at 6. There's an asterisk there. They're saying 189,000. That sounds about right. I mean, I don't know. Number 7, Incredible Hulk. Number 8, Avengers. Number 9, there we go, Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, 184,000. Saying Avengers is 185,000. The Hulk is an up-and-coming popular title for Marvel. Iron Man as well. All of these most of these characters tie into the Avengers. The Hulk doesn't really tie into the Avengers anymore, but man, they used the Hulk a lot in the 70s. Hulk had crossovers galore in the 70s. He would battle, because you could use the Hulk the Hulk was misunderstood. So you could use the Hulk to battle Spider-Man. You could use the Hulk to battle. They even had Hulk battle Daredevil in a comic book, in an older comic book. Hulk would battle, they used him in Captain America. Used him in the Defenders, which comes in at number 12 there. They battled Thor. He would battle Iron Man. He'd battle Submariner. But he also had his own villains as well. So the Hulk was used like crazy in the 70s. Like he was the main crossover, the main crossover character. There were some others as well, of course, Spider-Man, but Spider-Man has his own Marvel team-up book. So, we're still in 1973 here. Sergeant Fury outselling Captain America, which is 175,000. Daredevil comes in at number 11. Daredevil at 168,000. You'll see Daredevil drop off even more. Daredevil was they kind of had a weird thing with Daredevil in the 70s. I don't think they knew really how to utilize the character. That, of course, will change. But, they would team him up with the Black Widow, and they'd give him weird villains. They didn't know whether to make him more like Spider-Man. They didn't know whether to make him more like, kind of like a Batman type character. Every once in a while, they even tried to make him fight more like cosmic-based villains. It just didn't make any sense. They teamed him up. They even had Daredevil and the Black Widow for a little while, was the official title of the book. They tried a lot of stuff. I don't think they really had a clear direction where they were going to take that character. Defenders is you're kind of seeing the rise of the team books a little bit. Of course, Fantastic Four is number 2. Defenders was kind of an Avengers type book. It had Doctor Strange, Valkyrie, Nighthawk, the Hulk, I believe even Silver Surfer for a short time. But it was kind of with Doctor Strange as the kind of the leader. It was kind of the Avengers fighting against more occult, more fantasy type characters. And as you can see, 152,000 copies. Never like super popular though. That's not that doesn't equate anything to what they did with like current Defenders, where they made it Jessica Jones and Daredevil and Iron Fist and Power Man. This is a totally different Defenders team, and they had some like far out stories around 1973. I think Steve Gerber, the guy that created Howard the Duck, I think he was the one writing Defenders at the time. I never really was drawn to the Defenders that much. I would read Defenders comic books, but I wouldn't buy them. I didn't really like the artwork going on at the time at the time, and I'm talking about later 60s or I'm talking about later 70s. Of course, I wasn't into comic books in 1973. I didn't know any of this stuff. I'm only like 4 years old at the time. Then you've got Marvel Superheroes, which is a reprint book, total reprint book. Now you've got Rawhide Kid, Marvel Tales, another reprint book. You've got Ghost Rider bursting on the scene here. Says 135,000. Ghost Rider, you'll see Ghost Rider kind of shoot up a little bit in the later 70s. Marvel Premiere is kind of a title where they had two kind of titles like that, Marvel Premiere and Marvel Spotlight, where they give new characters kind of they were testing out new characters to see what would stick. A lot of cool characters came out of Marvel Premiere, Marvel Spotlight. Marvel Premiere, I believe, had Iron Fist, but that might have been Marvel Spotlight. I can't remember. Pretty sure it was Marvel Premiere, though, that you would have the first appearance of a lot of characters. I think Iron Fist is the one that comes to mind, but that doesn't happen until 1974, I believe. Then you've got the X-Men still down here, 127,000. The X-Men are at 18. They're just languishing. The X-Men had, at this time, the X-Men now were bi-monthly, and they were starting their reprint books. Marvel tried everything to try to get the X-Men to go over, and it just wasn't working. They brought in Neil Adams, one of the best commercialized comic book artists. It still didn't take. So I think Roy Thomas took over writing the book. They just couldn't get the X-Men to. They couldn't find an audience for the X-Men, so to speak. And as you can see, there's no sales figures for a lot of stuff. You've got Crazy Magazine, which was kind of the ripoff of Marvel's version of a ripoff of Mad Magazine. Everything else, the rest is kind of like Dracula Lives, Frankenstein. Down here is kind of interesting. Number 30 is Hero for Hire. He's just kind of starting out here. That's Luke Cage. And then you've got Jungle Action as well, which is the Black Panther. Black Panther was created in the pages of the Fantastic Four, and they finally kind of gave him his own comic book called Jungle Action. Later on, they would give him the Black Panther comic book, and by Jack Kirby later on in the 60s. But it was never, even though Marvel wanted to hold on to the character, kind of a fan. The fans seemed to like the character, but for some reason it never equated to his own comic book sales. But he was much like Luke Cage and Iron Fist. They were kind of had a cult following, along with Shang-Chi as well, with Master of Kung Fu. As you can see down here, all the titles. You got Submariner down there at number 50. How many do they have? They got 62 titles here. All the horror stuff and the romance stuff and the Western stuff had really fallen off. So that is 1973. Interesting little note, 1973. Thanos debuted in Iron Man number 55. That's kind of interesting. In a year of low sales, Incredible Hulk for the first time fell below 200,000 copies a month. The Avengers, Captain America, and Daredevil all sold decently, but were always considered second-tier heroes for Marvel. So let's go back. But like I said, overall, comic book sales are down. Plus, along with the fact that there's more titles to choose from. So let's jump ahead to 1978. We're jumping 5 years later. And you're going to see here, and I've glanced over this before doing this. I didn't really dive deep into all this, but I did give this stuff a glance ahead. 1978, of course, as you can see, and there is an asterisk here, Star Wars, big cultural phenomenon. Of course, it goes without saying. I don't have to explain any of this. The Star Wars comic book, to they're saying 278,000 copies. I know for a fact. Now, in 1978, the Star Wars comic book had been out for almost a year. You got to remember, Star Wars was released in 1977, but it was re-released in 78. I remember as a kid going to see Star Wars. I only saw Star Wars once or twice in 1977. I got my mom. I got to drag my mom to. I think it had been out for like 2 weeks before I got to see it as a kid, because all my friends were like making fun of me. You haven't seen Star Wars yet. I'm like, oh great. So finally talked my mom into taking me. I'm 8 years old. But in 1978, excuse me, 1978 they re-released it in theaters, and I must have seen that damn thing 15 times in 1978. So. But by 1978, Star Wars comic book, it debuted in 77. And I know it sold million copies. It was everywhere. You go into grocery stores, it was there. You go into department stores, it was there. It was in Sears. They had it displayed in JCPenney. They had it displayed everywhere. The Star Wars comic book was everywhere. Marvel had it advertised. And it almost didn't come to be. Once again, Stan Lee did not want to accept the license, even though he saw that Conan was a big deal. Once again, Roy Thomas said, no, we need to jump on this. Kind of in 1977, before the release of Star Wars, it wasn't a thing that anybody thought was going to be successful. There was just a handful of people that thought Star Wars was going to do anything. George Lucas had faith in it, but a lot of George Lucas's crew that he ran with that were from that Southern California film school, Francis Ford Coppola, he ran with Steven Spielberg. They kind of had that same, they kind of ran in that same crowd. The only guy that really, according to George Lucas, the only guy that really said, hey, you got a hit here is Steven Spielberg. But I guess, Roy Thomas said, yeah, let's take a chance on this Star Wars licensing. And they did. And it was huge. It turned around Marvel Comics. The Star Wars comic book probably was one of the most single-handed reasons why comic books started to really gain some ground in the late 70s into the 80s. It turned around the industry. You can't say enough about the effect on the comic book industry that the Star Wars comic, the effect it had. Because, of course, now you had a big explosion in all the licensing stuff. You had, Battlestar Galactica. Now the sci-fi things, all over TV. You had Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica, Logan's Run. I believe that was even pre-Star Wars or the same time as Star Wars. You had Logan's Run, Micronauts. Later on, it was ROM, the Space Knight. They even licensed Godzilla, Shogun Warriors, explosion in life. I'll probably do a whole episode in just that kind of stuff, the licensing stuff. And you still had Conan. But Star Wars made a huge impact on Marvel Comics. It really took Marvel Comics over the top. So as you can see, it is the number one best-selling comic book in 1978. Amazing Spider-Man right there at number 2. 258,000, holding strong, but still down from the sales in the 60s. Number 3, Spectacular Spider-Man, 219,000 copies. It debuted the year before. Like I said earlier, there was kind of an internal agreement at Marvel that Spectacular Spider-Man would more focus on lesser-known villains. It would focus more on Peter Parker's academic life. A lot of the main characters from Amazing Spider-Man weren't transferred over to Spectacular Spider-Man. And he had lesser known villains that he fought. I think the most mainstream villain that I remember him fighting was the Vulture, There was a Vulture, Hitman, Punisher run. I'm not even sure if Punisher was in that run. They had Amazing Spider. They had the Punisher, Hitman saga, and Amazing Spider-Man around the same time. But they had a really cool. They kind of started things off. They had the number one issue of Spectacular Spider-Man had the tarantula. Nobody knew who the tarantula was. And then it was the Vulture, and they had that really cool little story arc with the Spider-Man, Vulture, and the Hitman. So they used lesser known villains. Later on, they used like Lightmaster, Morbius, which was from Amazing Spider-Man, but he wasn't like a widely known or used villain in any of the Spider-Man books. You know, he had a short-lived run, and they were kind of done with him. But they brought him back in Spectacular Spider-Man. Really, they had some really cool storylines in Spectacular Spider-Man. It became one of my mainstay books that I would purchase every month off of the spinner rack. And I remember 1976 when it first debuted. I was there. I think the first one I got was number 2, and then I ended up getting issue 1 in a back bin, at a back or finding it somewhere else on a spinner rack in a grocery store. But I always bought every month. I bought both Amazing Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man. And that for a short time, I liked Spectacular Spider-Man more than Amazing Spider-Man. As you can see, number 4, Spider-Man's ruling here in 1978, Marvel team up. And also another thing that happened with Spider-Man is that they had a merchandising explosion with Spider-Man. They had the Spider-Man toys, web shooters, Spider-Man, Green Goblin, things that you could stick on the wall and make the Spider-Man, the Green Goblin, travel on the little web line. Spider-Man merchandising was everywhere. I had the Marvel superhero lunchbox going to school, 5th, 6th grade, who was smack dab right there. The main character on the lunchbox was Spider-Man. That was their big thing. They also started a Spider-Man live action television show, which didn't end up going over very well. It had Nicholas Hammond as Peter Parker. But, I mean, in the late 70s, that's a very hard thing to pull off with nothing but practical stunts. You know what I mean? So it was, I know Stan Lee wasn't happy with it. He had, of course, the Hulk was on. The Hulk was a bigger hit. The Hulk was on CBS, and it was a much bigger hit. It was more of a drama type. It wasn't really geared toward a younger viewer. Super depressing. I always liked Bill Bixby anyway, but they did the best they could. But I was super excited to see the 1978 premiere of The Incredible Hulk on television, and I loved it. But then as the year went by, I realized that I'm never going to see the Hulk fight like a supervillain on this show. So I kind of started losing interest a little bit. But the first 2 years were really good, and then it kind of went downhill after that. I love the Spider-Man live action in 1978. I was obsessed with it. I love the theme song. But once again, I realized you're never going to see Spider-Man fight supervillains in this show. Or even really act like Spider-Man, do Spider-Man justice. Lou Ferrigno looked good in the makeup, and it was a convincing visual of the Hulk. The Spider-Man was kind of not so much. The web shooter was jank. The way they depicted him firing his web was just like a white rope. A little janky. He had the utility belt, the Spider-Man utility belt on the outside of his costume, and his mannerisms just were kind of silly. But I was happy enough to see Spider-Man just fight street thugs, because in the Spider-Man comic book, he fought a lot of street thugs. So that's what was going on in 1978. So Spider-Man's a big deal. You see the Hulk. Let's not jump ahead too much. You've got Spider-Man at 2, 3, and 4 with Marvel Team Up. 1978, really good run of Marvel team ups. They brought in some they had a run of Chris Claremont and John Byrne, and some of my favorite Marvel team ups are from 1978. I think I covered a couple of them on a previous episode. uh, they just had a really good run of Marvel team up. They had him Spider-Man teaming up with Black Widow and Nick Fury, and I know they had a run where they had the Wasp and Yellow Jacket and Miss Marvel, and they were fighting the Super Skrull. That was between like 1977, 1978. And John Byrne did some of those, and of course John Byrne's my favorite. So I always picked up Marvel team up. Number 5, going strong, Conan. Still Conan, all throughout the 70s here, top 10 seller for Marvel. 215,000 copies. Roy Thomas made the right choice picking up that license. Conan would still stay as a top 10 seller, throughout the early 80s as well, as you'll see. Now, it starts to fall off later, but they did end up having, I think it was 1982, that they had the Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan movie as well. So that might have, I know they also had another Conan magazine, like a black and white, the Savage Sword of Conan. And they had quite a few Conan spinoff books as well. We'll see that here in a little bit. Number 6 is Iron Man. Iron Man's going strong here. 1978. Once again, this is right around the Demon in the Bottle storyline that kind of segues into the 80s. Just a great run of Iron Man throughout the late 70s, early 80s. Just a incredible, fantastic run of Iron Man. Some of my favorite comics are the Iron Man from 1978 to like 1983. Marvel 2-in-1. This is a newer title. This is The Thing. Ben Grimm, The Thing from the Fantastic Four, was a wildly popular character. And it seemed like a lot of the artists liked to draw The Thing, and a lot of the writers gravitated toward that character for some reason. So you can see Marvel 2-in-1 right here. Even though the sales overall, 177,000 doesn't sound impressive per issue. Marvel 2-in-1 in the top 10, even when sales are down. Even over the Fantastic Four at number 8 at 177,000 copies. Fantastic Four had a little bit of a fall off in the late 70s, it seemed to me. I really enjoyed the George Perez artistic run that he had on the Fantastic Four. But Fantastic Four kind of were flip-flopping between artists and writers. They didn't have a whole lot of consistency there. But 1978, I'm not 100% sure who was writing Fantastic Four at the time. Could have been Lynn Wein. I know they kind of swapped back and forth creative teams, and I think it kind of hurt the Fantastic Four a little bit. Another thing that happened, and this is entirely my opinion, in 1978, they released a Fantastic Four animated cartoon on Saturday mornings, which to me was an absolute disaster. It didn't have the Human Torch in it. They decided that depicting a guy on fire would be bad for little kids, so they ended up putting in Herbie the robot, which they ended up implementing into the comic book at the time, and it didn't turn out well. Okay, I don't think I thought some of the stories of the of that Fantastic Four animated series for Saturday morning was decent. They had some interesting characters. They implemented the Impossible Man, the Inhumans, Blastar, Annihilus, of course, Doctor Doom. But overall, it's just not the Fantastic Four. You can't have the Fantastic Four without the Human Torch. You know what I mean? Just a silly decision, in my opinion. But who? Maybe they wanted to forego what they saw as maybe future legal problems. I have no idea. But the whole Herbie the robot thing was a turnoff for me. I would watch it, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. course, you had the Super Friends on television for DC and all of that. I even preferred to watch the Super Friends, the current Super Friends in 1978, than to watch that Fantastic Four animated. It would have probably been different for me if they would have included the Human Torch in there. You just can't have the Fantastic Four without the Human Torch. Dumb decision in my opinion, but I mean, who's to know? As you can see, Incredible Hulk top 10 still. Number 9, they're getting 171,000 overall sales are down, but it's getting a boost from the television show. Avengers at number 10, starting to the team books are starting to kind of climb up the ladder here a little bit. Avengers number 10, you've got Defenders at number 11. Then you've got reprint book, Ghost Rider 1978. Evil Knievel was huge in 1977, 1978. Big cultural icon. You had kind of that biker. You kind of had that biker culture going on, and Marvel was right there to take advantage. Even though I very rarely bought a Ghost Rider book, I'd read through them. I didn't like the internal artwork. There was he had some interesting villains. I think he had a villain called the Death's Head, and he had a real visually appealing villain called the Orb that had a big eyeball as a helmet. That really kind of grabbed me as a kid a little bit. I remember buying that issue eventually buying that issue out of a like a back issue box of comic books at a bookstore. But I always thought that Orb character was kind of cool, but I didn't really like the artwork of Ghost Rider. Thor has kind of fallen off here at number 15. I thought Thor comics in the early 70s, mid 70s were pretty cool. But later on, as you go down later in the 70s, it kind of got tired a little bit. A lot of the fans didn't like the whole Dr. Donald Blake persona. They were kind of tired of Thor being kind of pigeonholed into that kind of situation where he stomps his cane on the ground and transforms into Thor. So you'll see this kind of turn around later. What If is number 16. What If? I think this was the second year for What If. What If was a popular book, but the problem with What If was it was pretty much double. It was a double-sized issue because they had to tell the whole story in one issue. But What If was a popular book, and some of the premises of the story were kind of cool as a kid. What if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? What if Sue Storm and Namor the Submariner got married instead of her marrying Reed Richards? Just some cool. What if Daredevil were an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Just some cool issues. But I think I bought one or two off of the rack. But like I said, it was a more expensive book, and money was in short supply. Marvel premieres, same thing I talked about earlier. You got Master of Kung Fu coming in at 128,000 copies. Master of Kung Fu never really was implemented into the Marvel universe that much. Every once in a while, he was implemented in, but it was a character that they were trying to take advantage of the Kung Fu craze. Kung Fu craze had kind of died out a little bit. Bruce Lee was a huge cultural icon. That entire character was based after Bruce Lee. That's no mystery. Kung Fu stuff was popular, and then it would be overtaken, like in the early 80s, by the ninja craze. But I remember the Black Belt Theater on Saturday night, midnight, that I would beg my parents, can I stay up on a Saturday night, at midnight, and it would start, and then I'd be running around my living room, here I am, 9 years old, and I'm running around my living room, knocking over chairs and, acting like I'm these kung fu masters that I was watching on Black Belt Theater that we had on it ran from like midnight to 3, and they would show 2 old kung fu movies from the 70s, and that's the very first time I got introduced into some of these Shaw Brothers. I think that was more 1979, where I'm like 10 years old. But yeah, I was obsessed with the kung fu Shaw Brothers kung fu movies. Later on, they went downhill a little bit in the 80s, but early 80s, but like Five Deadly Venoms and Crippled Avengers and all of that stuff. You know, the 36 Chambers of Shaolin, all of those movies I just loved as a kid, because they were just first premiering in the United States. And Black Belt Theater, I had to watch it on Saturday nights, from 12 to 3. Then you have at 19, you have Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman also had an animated series that started at 126,000. There was kind of a debate within Marvel whether or not to do a spin-off of Spider-Man, the Spider-Woman, but Stan Lee really championed it, because he said, we're going to make an animated out of it, and we're going to make this, Spider-Man's wildly popular. We're going to make a female version of Spider-Man. It kind of was, I think it was one of the bigger selling debut books, because I think in 1978, this was the debut of the Spider-Woman comic book. I'm pretty sure about that. And the animated show would follow, thanks to Stan Lee, the animated show would be developed. It wasn't a terrible animated show at the time. It was Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, but it wouldn't last. And then they would have, they'd have different versions of Spider-Woman throughout the years. I know the Julia Carpenter version with the black suit with the white thigh-high boots, that was kind of the foreshadowing of the new black suit Spider-Man. Her first appearance was in Secret Wars #7, I believe. Jim Shooter, kind of a rebooting of the Spider-Woman character. Not a wildly popular character, but it debuted pretty well. So it lasted. I'm not sure how long the run lasted. It lasted a few years, I'm sure. Then later they would do the same thing with the Hulk and She-Hulk. As you can see, Daredevil's floundering down here at 21. 1978, there were rumors going that they were going to be canceling the Daredevil book. Daredevil was relegated to bi-monthly status. So you can see Captain America is down in the dumps here at number 22. And then the X-Men, these 3 titles were floundering, not doing very well at all. They never had, Captain America never had like a consistent creative team. Jack Kirby had taken over the store basically for about a year. Jack Kirby took over Captain America from 76 to 77. Before that, though, they had terrible art in Captain. I mean, Sal Buscema would fill in every once in a while for Captain America, which, he's a quality artist, but they had a run with Frank Robbins as the artist in the mid-70s that did Captain America no favors. Captain America fell off big time because of that. In my opinion, Frank Robbins, one of the worst artists ever to draw a Marvel comic. I know that sounds harsh. A lot of people share that opinion. I used to read some of the because I was big into Captain America starting in like 1980. Because John Byrne, Roger Stern had a run of the Captain America book, and it really turned me on to the book. So I got all the back issues. At one point, I had every Captain America from 1969 to 1985. I had the complete collection. And I really got into Captain America in the early 80s. But in the 70s, Captain America was kind of floundering a little bit. besides the Jack Kirby run, which a lot of the fans liked, but he didn't stay on that. He ended up doing his own thing, the Eternals. So just to kind of to back up my statement about Frank Robbins, I should let's see if I've got any Frank Robbins. I shouldn't be doing this, but let's see if I've got any Frank Robbins Captain America bookmarked. Yeah, I do actually. Oh boy. This is kind of ties into what I was saying earlier about, I think this is 1975 or early 1970. Yeah, this is going to be 1975. That's not a Frank Robbins cover right there, but the internal art is Frank Robbins, as you can see. Let's get off the here we go. Steve Englehart, author, like I was saying earlier. This is the Nomad. This is right in the middle of the Nomad run here, where that's Steve Rogers, yellow and blue costume there, but it says ushers in a new look to comics' most exciting hero, courtesy of comics' most dynamic talents. Steve Englehart. I like Steve Englehart's writing. Frank Robbins art. Oh boy, big mistake. I had some friends that liked the Captain America character from the Avengers, but we would make fun of this little run of Captain America. The art is just god awful, terrible here. And this is one of his better issues. Let's put it that way. But there's some real cringy. What is this here on this panel? This middle panel. Let me zoom in here. Like, what the heck is this? What the heck is this all about? If you compare this silliness, this looks like something you'd see in comic books from like the late 50s, early 60s. You know what I mean? This is just some silly art, but yeah, let me get off of that. That's kind of where we're at with Captain America. So Captain America never really recovered sales wise from that disastrous turn. And as you can see, X-Men in 1978, 115,000. Boo. Relegated to bi-monthly still. 78 though. I want to talk about X-Men in 1978 just shortly, briefly here. 1978 X-Men, you've got John Byrne coming on the X-Men. You've got Chris Claremont has been on the book now for a while. 1975 was the reboot, basically, of the X-Men, where they brought in the new team. It hadn't really taken hold yet. I'm going to do an episode just on kind of the history behind that a little bit. But as you can see, X-Men still not in the sales, even though that's really going to change. There's going to be a huge turnaround here. Power Man, you still got Sergeant Fury drop off quite a bit. Power Man, number 25. It's Power Man and Iron Fist by 1978. They've joined the two characters together. One of my personal favorite comic books. It never was a huge seller, though. Doctor Strange was never like a big seller. Kind of a little side note, Doctor Strange is number 26 here at 105,000 copies. Doctor Strange, the rumor was at around this time that Frank Miller, like the new up and coming superstar, Frank Miller, was going to be taking over the artistic duties of Doctor Strange. They even put an ad out in one of the Marvel comics with an advertisement with a Doctor Strange Frank Miller Doctor Strange drawing coming soon. From I think I can't remember who was the writer that they advertised. I want to say Roger Stern, but Frank Miller was the art. They were hyping that, and it never happened. Instead, he took over Daredevil. He didn't take over Doctor Strange. So that's kind of a trivia thing there, that Frank Miller almost took over the reins artistically of Doctor Strange. I think Daredevil, I think the promise that he was going eventually, he was going to be the writer artist and take full creative control over the Daredevil book, swayed his decision to eventually take over Daredevil, and that's what had happened. Roger McKenzie was drawing Daredevil when Frank Miller took over, and that lasted about 3 issues. And then they gave Roger McKenzie the heave-ho and said, "Frank, it's your book." And they had already made the decision basically to cancel Daredevil. I think I talked about this in a previous episode. So anyway, as you can see, going down the list here, you still got Black Panther, stuff like Logan's Run, Miss Marvel. Red Sonja was one of the spinoffs of Conan. And in 1978, it didn't really take hold yet. You've got, but eventually it would creep up because they had a Red Sonja movie, and you remember that the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie hadn't been released yet. 1978. I'm sure they're in talks about possibly making a Conan the Barbarian movie, but nothing was done until 1982 on that. You've got other licensed stuff like John Carter, Warlord of Mars, Tarzan, Godzilla, Human Fly, which was based on a real stuntman guy that did like crazy, he would climb buildings and stuff. I'm not sure whose decision it was to make a comic book out of that. Godzilla at 39. Godzilla I don't think was ever a big seller licensing wise. I love the Godzilla comic book, but I don't think it ever like went over that well. And as you can see, Howard the Duck is way down here. Supervillain Team Up didn't last very long. I like Supervillain Team Up. It's just I don't think it went over that well. And as you can see, everything is on its last leg here as far as like Tomb of Dracula, Kid Colt, Outlaw, all that stuff is kind of Invaders. Frank Robbins, he was the main artist on the Invaders. Invaders that was on its last leg. Howard the Duck was, they eventually did make a movie of Howard Duck. I don't think they ever gave Howard the Duck its full due of potential. I think that book was kind of frowned on by Marvel as a whole. So let's see what they say here. Conan the Barbarian with estimated sales may have ranked a very impressive 5 of the year. So, and of course, they talk about the Spider-Man live-action TV series that eventually failed, but Spider-Man was still a big deal. And of course, there was tons of Spider-Man merchandising. So it says Spider-Woman was the hottest debut Marvel title that year. They don't know the exact sales figures. So anyway, a lot of these sales figures are, I mean, they're pretty accurate, but a lot of it's speculation as well. So, but it kind of paints a picture of the trend, what's going on. So let's jump to 1983. Now, from 1970, I'm kind of doing 5-year jumps here. Let's jump to 1983. Oh boy, here's the Hobgoblin thing starts here, 1983. So let's go down to the sales here. And best-selling comics of 1983. No surprise here. Uncanny X-Men now is number 1 at 336,000 copies of each issue. It's not bi-monthly anymore. John Byrne has been off the comic book now for like 2.5 years. Chris Claremont is still writing. They brought Dave Cockrum back, but that run from 1979 to 1981, that run of X-Men just skyrocketed X-Men to the top of comic book sales. And now they're talking about, of course, spin-offs. But John Byrne, my favorite artist, had left the book in December of 1980. So, but still going strong. They had such great legendary storylines: Days of Future Past, Dark Phoenix, Hellfire Club, all that stuff. So, number 2 coming in 1983, Daredevil. Once again, Frank Miller by this time Frank Miller had left the book, but they were still coasting on the popularity of the character. Daredevil was on the chopping block. It was basically dead, a dead character. Jim Shooter took over as full-time editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, I believe in early 1979, and he just said, it's dead anyway. Frank Miller, it's all yours. Frank Miller, legendary turnaround of Daredevil, made Daredevil by 1983 the second best-selling comic book basically there was. Huge turnaround. Fantastic Four still going strong. Spider-Man at number 4. Amazing Spider-Man at 241. Alpha Flight coming in in 1983. John Byrne creation. 239. Alpha Flight. I know the first issue of Alpha Flight was the best-selling comic book that year, I believe. I believe the first issue of Alpha Flight sold well over 500,000 copies. And it was the number 1 comic book. That particular issue was the number 1 comic book of 1983. So I'm pretty sure about that. Don't quote me on that. The Avengers have jumped up. The Avengers have jumped up big time. By 1983, John Byrne is also doing Fantastic Four. He's taken over Fantastic Four. He wouldn't be on the book too much longer. I think he had like a 2.5-year run on Fantastic Four, where he was both writer and artist, and it really boosted. Fantastic Four was lagging a little bit in the eyes of the reader, and the John Byrne run really boosted the sales of that of Fantastic Four, and also Alpha Flight, which he ends up leaving. John Byrne has said recently in interviews that he was never like a big fan of Alpha Flight. They kind of pushed him into doing Alpha Flight, but he never like had the love of Alpha Flight that everyone assumes that he had. He really wasn't on the book that long. I think he did 1.5 years and then he left. So Avengers number 6. Avengers kind of had a big boost from 1980 to 1981, where once again, guys like George Perez and John Byrne had done runs on it, and it boosted the popularity. The Avengers, you'll see, will fall off after 1983. 1983, I didn't like Avengers in 1983. I was starting to get turned off on the book. I didn't like the direction they're going. I might do an episode just about the treatment of one of my favorite characters during that time. So, but right now they're number 6. New Mutants, first year spinoff of the X-Men, going to be wildly popular. It's Chris Claremont doing the writing. Bob McLeod, I believe, was the artist on the first couple issues, and then Bill Sienkiewicz from Moon Knight fame, the artist, ends up taking over New Mutants, and it even pushes New Mutants even higher. Conan's still number 8. You've got Red Sonja, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man. Star Wars has really taken a fall off. 1983, they've got Return of the Jedi coming out, but what had happened earlier with the Star Wars book was they would do the adaptation of the movie, and then they would do their own storyline, and then they would pause that storyline for Empire Strikes Back, and then they'd have like 5 or 6 issues where they do the They do the adaptation of Empire Strikes Back. They didn't do that with Return of the Jedi. They just kept on with their normal run, and then the Return of the Jedi was handled in a separate book. So, but Star Wars, even though the Return of the Jedi book might have sold quite well, the the Star Wars comic book started to languish because they couldn't get a consistent art. Howard Chaykin, who originally did the early run of the Star Wars book, the artist, wildly popular artist, he left the book, and the book, quality wise, kind of took a downturn. I still read it from time to time, but it seemed like they had a different artist like every other issue. So I like consistency in my comic book runs of the art, and Star Wars didn't consistently have good quality art after the 1980s. Marvel Team Up has fallen drastically here to number 13, and so has Spectacular Spider-Man. They would cancel Marvel Team Up a few years after this. As you see, another licensed property here, ROM, outselling G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe was Hasbro. ROM was originally Parker Brothers. ROM had been around now for a few years and kind of had a cult following. And I wish I would see some independent creator or something, maybe Robert Kirkland or something, take over the ROM licensing. G.I. Joe, IDW has had the G.I. Joe and Transformers licensing pulled from them recently due to just bad press of some of the people they had handling the book, from his tweets about 9/11 and all that. So the G.I. Joe Transformers licensing is kind of up in the air. You've got What If at 17, still fairly strong. You've got Thor really falling off, but you'll see a turnaround on that. This is 1983. This is right before Walt Simonson's legendary run of Thor, which will turn around Thor in the sales. King Conan, Captain America has really fallen down to 20. Got Dazzler, a character not sure. It debuted in the X-Men. Power Man, Iron Fist. Power Man and Iron Fist are basically on their last leg here. It would last another couple years, I think, and then they'd cancel it. Master of Kung Fu, I think this was the last year, and they canceled it. The sales aren't doing much. Doctor Strange is way down. The Thing had his own book, and it wasn't selling that well. They had kind of made Marvel 2-in-1 into now just The Thing. And I never really, I read it, but I never really bought it. They kind of had The Thing. The storyline was kind of basically him stuck in the negative zone and those adventures. And it was okay for a little while. I didn't really care for it that much. As you can see, it really fell off. But at the same time, John Byrne's Fantastic Four run, which he put She-Hulk in, inserted She-Hulk in for The Thing. So, and the fans really liked it. And it's John Byrne, so it's normally going to sell. They had Marvel Tales, which is a reprint. Ghost Rider has really fallen down. Moon Knight at this time was never a big seller. I think Moon Knight was basically a direct distributor only title. I never saw a Moon Knight comic book. Moon Knight comic book debuted in 1980 with Doug Minch writing and Bill Sienkiewicz as the art. I love the book. They were hard to find. They were very hard to find. Never saw them on the spinner racks at a grocery store. So you basically had to go to a dedicated comic book shop to get them. Micronauts are way down. They're about ready to cancel that. Even though I love the Micronauts, the early run of the Micronauts, the art was so beautiful. Michael Golden. If you've never heard of Michael Golden, he wasn't a full-time comic book artist. He's one of those best kept secret guys. But I'll probably do a show. He does one of my all-time favorite Avenger annuals, and his art is just awesome. And he had a short run on the Micronauts. I think Bill Mantlo was writing Micronauts as well. Bill Mantlo was a writer that was pretty much charged with doing a lot of the licensing stuff, like ROM. I know it's Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema doing ROM, and he also wrote Micronauts for a while. So, and I believe he wrote the Godzilla book, maybe even the Shogun Warriors, but I'm not. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. He was kind of their fill-in writer guy, but and a tragic story that happened with Bill Mantlo later on. I think he's paralyzed for life or something terrible happened. But I always liked Bill Mantlo's work. He had a run on the Hulk as well. So that is kind of 1983, what happened. I kind of skipped one, though. I had kind of an interesting little thing that I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I've got a snapshot thing here about comic book sales that I got from a John Byrne website here. The comic book reader kind of snapshot for 1980. So we're backtracking a little bit. I had forgotten I had this. This is just July of 1980 sales. And let me also say that this isn't the market as a whole. This is like 40. This is the sales data from like 40 direct market comic book shops. So this isn't like big publishing sales numbers as a whole. But this kind of gives you an idea in 1980 what was going on. And you'll also have DC on this list as well. X-Men number 1. X-Men is number 1. X-Men number 134 is the top selling comic book between those direct market comic book shops that are participating, sending this data in. The Avengers number 190, X-Men 134, what's going on there? Dark Phoenix Saga. That's what's going on in 134. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Avengers number 196, that's the first appearance of Taskmaster, George Perez. Amazing Spider-Man number 205, I believe that's Roger Stern and John Romita Jr.'s one of their first issues together when they did a pretty good run of Amazing Spider-Man. Spider-Man ends up fighting the Juggernaut. It's a pretty good run between those two that creative team. Star Trek, this is 1980, right after the movie that came out. Was number 4. Fantastic Four is number 5. That's the pre-John Byrne run. King Conan, Conan the Barbarian, all that stuff is up there. Micronauts. Now, keep in mind, this is just July of 1980. Micronauts, What If, right there, top 10. Iron Man, early 1980 Iron Man. David Michelini, Bob Layton doing the art, I believe. Unbelievably good run of Iron Man. Spectacular Spider-Man, number 43. Marvel 2-in-1 is The Thing and the Inhumans. You've got She-Hulk. You've got the debut here. It's She-Hulk number 5, 1980, the debut of She-Hulk. Later on, John Byrne would do a short run of She-Hulk where it's the breaking the fourth wall version of She-Hulk where she knows she's in a comic book. Really good stuff. John Byrne really loved that character. The original run of Savage She-Hulk didn't really last that long. You've got Captain America. Well, why is Captain America on number 14 on the list? That's kind of a boost. This is the John Byrne, Roger Stern mini run of Captain America. So this is when I was first starting to get into Captain America. It's some good stuff. 246, right there when John Byrne, Roger Stern take over. ROM number 7. ROM, it says Marvel, Parker Brothers. Howard the Duck. You've got Thor. Once again, it's pre-Walt Simonson Thor. Star Wars is down. Marvel Team-Up's down. You got Spider-Man and the Shroud. They were getting some more obscure characters into the Marvel Team-Up book, teaming up with Spider-Man, and the sales were dropping. You've got the Hulk, which the quality of the Hulk book, even though it had a kind of a surge a little bit in the mid 80s, the Hulk was down in the early 80s. The show was being canceled. The Hulk just there's not a lot of good. I love the Hulk in the mid '70s. 1977, Sal Buscema was drawing the book. There's some really good Hulk storylines, but the Hulk dropped off. Defenders were kind of the Defenders weren't selling that well. They were going to be canceled in another couple years. Spider Woman, supervillain team up, and you've got Savage Sword of Conan. It's a black and white magazine that was $1.25. You see Master Kung Fu way down the list here, and then the first DC book on this list is Warlord. The point I was trying to make here is even Power Man, between these comic book stores that reported this data, even Power Man and Iron Fist were outselling DC's biggest titles. Legion of Superheroes. Machine Man is selling more between those comic book stores than Justice League of America, Green Lantern, where Batman is down here number 40. Batman was not selling. People kind of scoff at me when I say, oh, Batman, they just assume Batman was always a big seller. No, Batman, they were canceling Batman titles right and left. They canceled World's Finest. They canceled Brave and the Bold. They ended up making a new Batman and the Outsiders, which they ended up taking Batman off of it. But yeah, Batman was not doing well. Superman, way down. Number 41 for July of 1980. Action Comics, number 42. You and The Flash, way down here. Detective Comics, way down. Brave and the Bold, they ended up canceling that soon. All of this DC stuff languishing down here in the direct market of these participating comic book shops. So that's just kind of a quick snapshot. I wanted to do one more before I wrap up this episode. I wanted to do one more year. I'm kind of running longer than I intended. I'm going to do one more year, and that is the year of, if I've got it, I may not have it. So I may be ending at 1983. But I thought I had 1986, but I guess I do not have 1986. Bear with me here as I double check what I have bookmarked here. But I guess I do not have 1986 unless I am not seeing it. And I do not have 1986. So I'm going to stop it at 1983, and it kind of gives you the broad view of what was going on in the market. 1986, I can kind of tell you that 1986, I can kind of tell you that Walt Simonson's Thor went way up the list. The Avengers went way down. Captain America was still down, but it got a slight boost. Spider-Man was still fairly strong, but it dropped. But the big thing and the big jump up, and Daredevil went down. The X-Men titles and the spinoffs were still the top. Daredevil dropped quite a bit. It was kind of languishing a little bit from the momentum it got from the Frank Miller days was kind of subsiding, and the book was going down, but it was still better than it was in the 70s. They ended up canceling Conan. They ended up canceling Marvel Team Up. They brought in another title of Spider-Man called The Web of Spider-Man. And of course, you've got Secret Wars that came. They had two, Secret Wars 1, Secret Wars 2. Secret Wars was a huge seller. Best-selling comic book in 1984 was The Secret Wars. And you had Spider-Man with the black suit. So Spider-Man got a boost. Spider-Man never really dipped off that much, but it eventually all became about the X-Men. But Thor, like I said, Thor got a huge boost in sales, like in 84, 85, due to Walt Simonson. So that's pretty much going to wrap up this episode 8 of the show. Like I said, I appreciate anyone that takes the time to listen to me kind of ramble on about this stuff. I hope you found that somewhat interesting. It was interesting for me when I first kind of was starting to do a little research. Normally in this show, I don't do any research. I kind of just wing it. I kind of just think about a topic I'm going to talk about, and I kind of just impromptu do it. But I actually had to bookmark some pages and do a little research, dig a little bit for these sales figures, which aren't 100% accurate, but you can kind of get a overall broad picture of the trends that were going on in the comic book with comic book sales. So I appreciate anyone that takes the time to hang out. Like I said, episodes will eventually be uploaded to Spotify, and so you can catch me there. I think I'm also on like Stitcher podcast platform and all that. Hopefully, I can grow my audience a little bit in the future. We'll be uploading episodes to YouTube, and you can also catch me at over at Odyssey. Both are Count Chocula. If you just kind of do a YouTube search, you can find my YouTube channel at Count Chocula, and the same with Odyssey. So once again, I appreciate you hanging out, and until next time, I will talk to you later.